UK versus Germany, which is better?
The UK wins.
Germany wins this.
Sport, it's a major competition, isn't it, between the two countries. London, it's got the best culture, it's got the best music, it's got nice theatre. London is probably one of the few global cities. It's got everything that really matters to the soul. It exists in the UK.
Everything that matters to the soul. Germany's quite well known for the educational system. Everything that is done in Germany tends to be superior and first class. It's one of the few countries where you can enjoy skiing and the seaside.
It's a stunningly beautiful country, but
Do we have this on camera? Does it tend to be expensive?
off to a racing start.
Welcome to another episode of Relocation Leader. I'm your host, Zac Turbes, and today we have two very special guests. We have Simon and Sophie here to talk with us about relocation and DSP services to Germany and England. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
So, Simon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as well. So my name is Simon Johnston. I'm the CEO of Icon Relocation in the UK. Been in the relocation industry for about 30 plus years. Started Icon in 2001, and we're a UK-based company covering every square inch of the United Kingdom. So that's basically what we are. We focus on relocation and moving primarily.
Nice. And Sophie?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very honored and humbled to be here. My name is Sophie, as you've pointed out. I am very proud to be the owner-manager of Proforg, which is a German nationwide DSP. We've been around for almost half a century, and I've been around for just under 10 years. However, as I took over as a second generation, I sort of feel like I was born with the relocation virus.
Nice. So this podcast is going to be UK versus Germany. And so I think the question that everyone wants to know is, which is better?
I'm going to let Simon go first so that he actually has a chance.
Yes, off to a racing start. Well, obviously the UK. But for those who don't know, the UK and Germany has got a lot of history going here. Not just obvious reasons, things like sport. It's a major competition, isn't it, between the two countries. So as soon as you start talking about this, it sort of opens up many a conversation. But the key issue here is, okay, which is the best? Well, I'm going to be biased and say the United Kingdom. It's got the best capital in Europe, bar none, in the form of London. It's got the best culture, almost none. It's got the best music. It's got nice theatre. It's got everything that really matters to the soul. It exists in the UK. So UK wins.
So if you want to
Wow,
follow
everything
that
matters to the soul.
I thought I'd go with that.
So I'm definitely on the other side of that. Everything that is done in Germany tends to be superior and first class. Cars, for example, being one of those things that we make. It's one of the few countries where you can enjoy skiing and the seaside with less than a 6-hour car drive in between. So I'm just going to be quite patriotic and say that I definitely think Germany wins this.
I'll let you guys decide. But we're talking about relocation today, and so specifically, destination services to both the UK and to Germany. Do you guys want to give us just sort of a quick overview? Maybe, Sophie, you can go first with what do DSP services look like in Germany?
Okay, so it's definitely quite a broad spectrum of services that Proforg as a DSP, but also all of our DSP colleagues deliver. Of course, a large part of that is home search, home finding services. Most of that is centered around rental properties. There's not a lot of purchase going on in Germany. It tends to be a very renter-specific market. Everything that comes with that, anything to do with contracts, utilities, of course. There's 101,000 administrative processes that we love to, as Germans, make our foreign talent suffer through. So we support with all of those. And generally just make sure that our clients have an easy arrival and a better time in their original start in Germany.
Is there anything that, you guys deal with constantly when you're bringing people in to Germany that may be an assumption that, they think you guys are a certain way and then they get there and you have to sort of educate?
Oh, there's lots. I think Germany's a really easy country to have lots of preconceptions about. I think one of the biggest ones is that everybody expects us to be very organized and very sort of scheme A, B, C. And as soon as you start working with authorities or landlords or agents, you very quickly realize that that's not really as true as you hoped it would be. So There's a lot of waiting times. There's a lot of lack of digitization, which is quite a big problem in Germany. Yeah, I find it always quite interesting. I go to very remote places sometimes, and there's better internet than in some of our larger cities. So, yeah, we definitely still have some growth to do as a country on those items.
How do you guys coach through that?
It's a very difficult process. Explaining to somebody that there's a likelihood that they won't have internet for the first week in their new home when they move in with 2 teenage kids. I always say if you make it through that week, you're probably going to make it through your whole time in Germany. I think it's just really important to manage expectations, to be very aware of what it is. We also always try to be just a little bit humorous with it and to just keep people's minds open about it.
Nice. Simon, did you want to take a crack at that?
Well, a lot of what Sophie said you can echo across in regards to the core services, the relocation services are very similar. Obviously, the main focus is on home search and finding. The interesting thing between the two countries is quite different, isn't it? Because in Germany, the vast majority of people live in a rented property, whereas in the UK, it's completely the opposite. So the vast majority of people own properties. So therefore, you're looking at the rental market, you're looking at a very different scope straight away. So in the major cities like London, for example, but other major cities qualify, you have quite a lot of rental properties available. As soon as you go outside, the culture is very different. The drive is to actually own your property, so rental becomes less common. So there are quite unique challenges around that aspect. So one of the key issues is helping somebody when they're relocating to the UK, because one of the fun things is most people know the UK pretty well, or they think they know the UK pretty well. And a lot of it is true, but a lot of it's not, in the sense of London, for example. People think, well, I've seen London, I know it, I've been there, maybe there for a long weekend, I've gone there for holiday, I've seen it in films, and we know what it's like, and it's just not true. There's an expression about London. London isn't one city, it's 100 villages, and it's very true from that. It's just grown and grown and grown. So you have very different cultures, very different sort of experiences wherever you live in the city. So trying to get somebody to understand, okay, when you say London, what's important to you? And I go, I'm making London the epicenter of this conversation, but you can echo this across the UK. And they go, oh yeah, I know London. I go, do you? So let's really explore that. So that's kind of one of the key conversations, trying to work out what's important to them. The lifestyle is very different, the culture is different, the properties are very different. So in different parts of London, you've got different styles, different characteristics, different sizes of properties. UK properties tend to be much smaller than a lot of European countries. After all, we are quite a modest-sized island, so it doesn't come as a huge surprise. So you're trying to explain all that. So it's great most people have a view on it, and largely it's correct, but it's the details that are not there. And the fun thing is then try and help somebody through that. To actually then say, okay, well, you think you know UK, let's open the lid and find a bit that's going to work for you.
Do you think that it's easier to find fits for people given the diversity then?
It's a very rough rule, yes. I mean, the issue sometimes is that people have a wedded idea about a location, and I think that's largely because of historical aspects. So they may speak to somebody who relocated 10 years ago and say, oh, when I lived there before, I used to live in, say, Notting Hill, let's take a famous location. It's amazing what one film can do, by the way, to the rental prices. Before that, Notting Hill was a very cheap part of London. It wasn't a sought after. As soon as a film came out, the prices went through the roof. So therefore you have this situation where people say, well, it's really good to live here, but the market's changed dramatically. So it's changing so fast. So you have to say, well, that could have been true before, but actually the opportunity you're looking for now lives over here. So let's try and migrate your thinking to over here, and this is why it's going to work. So one of the key aspects, I think, for both of us, but certainly for the UK, is trying to help somebody to sort of ratify that thinking. You have a mindset of what you're hoping for, but it's probably not going to work out that way. In fact, I'm a bit of a data geek, so if you really want to open this conversation, I can bore both of you to the rest of the recording here. Is how often people actually think what they think they want and what they do want is really different. So we've done quite a lot of research on this and what people said the budget's going to be and what the expectations are going to be. I'm looking for 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom property here. This is what I'm looking for. And when you finish a relocation experience, it's usually something very different. And it's a better one because that's what they want. That actually is what they're seeking. But helping somebody through that's kind of the art of helping somebody with a relocation.
Wouldn't you generally say that's something that's not country specific though? The idea that you're moving to a country and you've looked at, different websites and you've had a quick browse of where you think you're going to live and what you're going to live in, and then you get there and then all of a sudden, you're faced with a reality that's quite different to what maybe in this case the internet
so true.
showed you. Don't you think that's
Also
applies
true.
to all of us all over the world.
Absolutely, and I have to take credit to the photographers for estate agents listings. I mean, they do the most amazing job at making this one-bedroom, tiny studio apartments look extraordinary. So yes, this is 100% true. The listings of properties is great. It's fantastic. You need listings, but please don't rely on them. So in the UK, they're famously out of date. Sort of side issue on that building for a second, because it's one of the things to explore. Is people say, well, there's you have equivalent to a central listing service of properties in the UK. And go, no, we don't. Not even close. What we have is a number of different places where different agents will then post their properties. But all this is a shop window. That's all it is. So it's not saying a point of truth. It's a way of trying to attract the most interested in there. So then trying to explain that. But you're 100% right. This is not a unique thing for the UK or a unique thing for Germany. It's just that the nature of it, the characteristics of it are different. Perhaps the agents and the rental market is very different. The rental market in the UK is quite a complex one. So it's difficult to understand initially. Once you get it, it makes sense. But up until then, it's not an easy thing to understand.
People moving to London, are there any sort of groups that you can think of that do well when they move to London in particular? Like maybe they're coming from like New York and rent is really high or something like that there. So they're used to dealing with a certain, rigmarole, and they get over there and it's either the same thing or it's maybe even better than what they've had to deal with in their last location. Is there anything like that, or is it just totally different?
You raise a really good point in the sense of if somebody's coming from New York and coming to London, actually, as cities go, they're remarkably twinned in quite a lot of ways. They're both financial hubs. You're both looking at properties which are probably quite modest in size. So there's a lot of similarity. The same is true for certain locations around the world, but you have some nationalities, like if you have an Indian coming to the UK, Indian properties tend to be substantially bigger than a British property. So that's quite a cultural shock for somebody. I would say the same thing, people coming from parts of the US, Canada, etc. One of the things to recognize is that it's a very different lifestyle. Same probably with Germany, if I'll explore that in a second. But it's the fact that your rental home is relatively modest because you live your life outside. You're going outside, you're enjoying all the facilities, you're enjoying what London brings to you. You've got parks everywhere, you've got facilities everywhere. So you wouldn't have it all in your property, you go out. So it is a different sort of lifestyle expectations. So I think some countries struggle with that. The upside, though, with London is it's probably one of the few global cities, I would say, in the world. And what I mean by that is almost every culture, every sort of nationality has a footprint somewhere in the city. And that's not necessarily true of everywhere. So if you're American and you want to enjoy the American side of London, I can tell you exactly where to go. I can tell you exactly what to do. The same as if you're from India or if you're coming from Germany, you're coming from France. There are very distinct areas which actually lean into it. And you can't say that for many other countries. So one of the things to explore is if you're coming, say, from France to the UK, do you want to have the French experience in London or do you want to have something else?
Maybe you want to go to the American experience, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So from that point of view, London in particular is fascinating, and the sort of surrounding areas, the home counties as they know around London, they're just diversity in a relatively small area. And the last thing I'll say before I sort of hand on is most people are quite surprised just how big London is. It's the biggest city in Europe. Only Moscow is bigger as far as the footprint is concerned. It's bigger than most Americans realize as well. I read a really interesting article, which I'm probably going to misquote, but it's size of a place like Philadelphia, Seattle, Dallas, and 2 or 3 other cities combined. It's the size of London. So when you're doing, a home search around London, you can't expect to go from one side to the other, like you could say in Dublin or Amsterdam. In the course of the day, it's just not going to work. So you really do have to spend time before coming here to understand the geography of the city. But that's a small price to pay, I think, for the diversity it offers.
Sophie, was there anything that you kind of picked out that you're like, I want to speak to that with regards to Germany and where you guys are at?
I think it's really interesting. I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in London, and in Germany we always say that, of course, Frankfurt is also this amazing financial hub, but of course in comparison, it's actually a very small city. And even places like Berlin, in comparison to London, are only a fraction of the size. So the accessibility to everything in Germany is a lot different than it is in the UK. I think that when you speak about what types of people are happiest in Germany, I really think Germany is a place for families. It's a very safe place to raise kids. It's a very nature-bound, open community to have families. So I'd say if there were, in our experience, transferees that ended up staying and sort of loving the German way of life, I would say that was mostly families. Whereas maybe downtown London, that's different.
It's really true. I mean, there's a whole conversation we could really explore here. There's no question. Contrary to the popular belief, actually, I do quite like Germany. It's a stunningly beautiful country. But
do we have this on camera?
I know. I never said that. But it is interesting because you talk about the financial sides of the city. If you're moving, say, a city broker from London to Frankfurt, their expectations are very different. They love London because it's just the epicenter of everything. If you can think of it, it's there. It's just the most important place. So if that's what you want, if you really want to enjoy life, then London's got it. And probably New York, I would suggest, could probably rival. And the sort of financial cities and Germany probably can't do the same thing. But then outside that, Germany has more space. I think it's interesting because Germany has more medium-sized cities, whereas we have one gigantic one. And so that in the UK, everything sort of feels pulled in by some form of gravity into southeast England and London. Germany probably has a sort of different sort of barometer around that, I guess.
There's a really good article in the Financial Times from a couple of years back that said Germany is the dream suburbia because it's basically, Germany's full of suburbs. But that's also, of course, because the geographic distances are not big. There's a lot of, like you said, medium-sized cities that have really good infrastructured suburbs. So it's really, it's just the country's set up quite differently.
Can you explain, maybe with school selection, what some of the differences might be there?
So I can't explain the differences, but I can do the German side.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
So Germany's quite well known for the educational system. It's quite specific in the way that children between the ages of 6 and 16 have to go to school, meaning that it's government controlled that children are actually enrolled into education. Homeschooling is generally not permitted in Germany. The public school system is very good. It's mostly directed by geography. Where you live, you get assigned to a specific primary or secondary school. And then, of course, we also have private schools and international schools that cater to either local population that's looking for international access or expat population that is very dependent on coming in and having basically a same blueprinted school that they could visit in Japan or London or Germany or wherever. Germany's very fortunate in that. It's also public schooling is very affordable, but also very good quality. There's a lot of integration options for non-German speaking children. And of course, kids tend to pick up languages pretty fast. So we see that happen a lot. But I know that in the UK, it's quite difficult.
It's different. But yes, you're right. There's different challenges. Again, if you like, leaning into the previous conversation where we talked about London being a really big city, and again, there is more to the UK than London, but let's just stay there because it's a fun topic. One of the things to be aware of, and the key difference between Germany and the UK, is that if you live in a location, you find a perfect house and there could be a school around the corner. In Germany, you'll perceive your children will go to that school. In the UK, that's not necessarily the case. The schooling system in the UK is very good. It really is. But one of the key issues is the restrictions in how many pupils you can have in a class. It's very heavily restricted. So therefore, if you find the ideal house and you're doing a home search, you've got to balance the schooling and the housing at the same time. So you've got to say, okay, this is a great place to live, love this house. Does the school around the corner have availability? And if it does have availability, great, then everything works. If it doesn't have availability, then no amount of pleading that you have the house next to it is going to get you into that school because the school is full. So you can't do anything. Now, the council, the local council, the borough that you're living in, will then make sure schooling is available, but that schooling could be then somewhere else within close proximity. So the key issue to look for is when you're doing a home search, you're trying to balance the both at the same time. So you find the right house and the right school. The other issue is this wonderful word called catchment. So if anybody lives in the UK, we all know this. I've had children, and you have this whole thing of trying to make sure you are living in the catchment of that ideal, dreamy school. So you have the school that's very sought after, and there'll be an area around it, quite literally as the name suggests, sort of a net around it. But if you live within that catchment, then you can apply for and go to the school. Doesn't mean you get in, because it could be oversubscribed, but you can get in, but you can apply to it. If you're just outside the catchment by a road or two, you're not getting in. So there is this whole secondary conversation about the schooling and housing. And once you sort of understand how it works, then it's absolutely fine. But it does come as a shock. So I think in America, it's more the same sort of system as Germany. So people say, oh, great, I'll find a property, and then I'll just put the children at local school. Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. Now, as soon as you go outside the major cities, the answer tends to be yes, by the way. Yeah. So it does calm down. And I think this is a reflection of the sort of city size and the geography that brings. So if you're going into the suburbia outside, then that's far more the case. And yes, you can make that work. So please be aware of that. Otherwise, everything you basically said is true of the UK. Schooling starts earlier, so it tends to be the rising fives, as they're known. So as you're going up to being 5, you then go to school. Otherwise, the rest is very true. Outside that, you have a very strong private schooling. So the state schooling, government schooling is very good. You have a very strong private schooling in the UK as well, not the cheapest. So you got there from really good private schools that don't cost a fortune right up to the famous ones, the Eton, the Harrows of the world, which are just breathtakingly expensive. And then you have the international schools, of course, certainly in London, they're all there. So you have a German school in London, there's a French school, there's an American school, of course, there's the international school. So you have so many options around that, but they tend to be really focused around the capital. There's a few outside it, like Aberdeen's got a great international school, but as a rough rule, they don't exist outside London itself. So schooling is far more complex. So if you're relocating and you have children, you start the conversation with the schooling to really explore that, and then you marry that to the home search experience.
That's fascinating.
Sorry. It's interesting because schooling, I would say, and my team would concur, schooling itself is, of course, you always try to find the right fit for the specific child, but what's actually really problematic in Germany is finding childcare for children under 3. Because Germany is a country where social benefits are the core of our existence, so it's very common for a parent to be on leave for an extended amount of time, up to several years. You can share the leave between parents, so traditionally there wasn't a lot of need for childcare for children under the age of 3. Of course, that's changed, and the infrastructure in terms of are there enough spaces for these children, how are they offered, is something that we're still in the process of catching up on that. So that's something that we have to do a lot of expectation management on for clients moving towards us, transferees moving with smaller children, that maybe both parents are working, finding options to provide childcare for little children is difficult. So I'm quite interested to hear how that is in the UK.
There is, depends where you are.
Right.
Again, it's very much a geography issue. So if you're in an area where there's high density, then I 100% agree with that. So you've actually got both parents might be working. Obviously, you haven't got the family or friend network around you to absorb a lot of that, which is culturally what a lot happens in the UK. I don't know about in Germany. But yes, you have the same sort of issue. As soon as you start going outside the major cities and you start going into the suburbs areas, then it calms down a lot. It becomes a lot easier. However, there is just high demand. Mm-hmm. I mean, the simple reality of the issue is that, I mean, I love the UK. I mean, it just is the best country. I mean, I know we're going to come back to that later, but it really is. But there
How
are a
often
few
does he have to say it for us to cut it out?
You have to say it 7 times and then they believe it.
Okay.
So you have to do that. But the issue is also that Southeast England is the most populated part of the whole of Europe, in the sense of density of people and properties, everything else. So, and that's not a bad thing, by the way, because there's just so much availability of everything there. But it does come with a price and some aspects to it. So you just have to be alive to that. It doesn't make a problem. You just got to lean into those conversations a bit more. Be aware of it. We can manage it, address it, and then the rest of it is a positive experience.
Does it tend to be expensive, childcare for younger children?
Can be. It's not crazy expensive. I think compared to Europe, I did read somewhere about this a while ago, and I'm not going to do it justice. But I think on the costing, it's not as high as I think as Germany, for example. But it can get costly. But as a rough rule, it tends to be very doable. That's a very rough rule. So I wouldn't. There's exceptions to this. Like I can hear myself saying this and actually go, yes, but if you're here or these circumstances, that's a very rough rule. I'll say it's quite doable. Again, I don't see that as a major problem. Lots of schools do have sort of breakfast clubs, do have other activities, for example, to help families. So if both parents are working, then they tend to lean in and help with that as well. So it's not unusual to have those sort of facilities, but I don't think that's particularly uniquely for the UK. I think most countries will have something like that.
Are there any trends that are specific to your respective countries that you maybe want to talk about, like the shifts, like a shift in the trends, and kind of how have you guys combated that or, provided service around those trends?
In regard to housing or anything in particular?
I think just broadly speaking, anything that, that you're dealing with that you didn't have to deal with, 5 years ago.
Ooh, okay. You can't have this conversation without really talking about housing, I think, initially. So it's almost impossible. There's nothing unique about this, I think, for both of us, but obviously COVID changed the conversation quite rapidly. So just for clarity of this, you had most people wanted to be in the cities, and then COVID came along, and most people did not want to be in the cities. So everybody wanted to be in the suburbs and surrounding areas. So the demand on that was enormous. Then prices then went obviously through the roof as a result. Again, nothing unique about that. Prices in the UK have stabilised, I think far more than maybe some other locations, I would suggest. However, prices still remain fairly high. The areas outside the major cities are still incredible demand. So one of the key issues when somebody's relocating, the trend you have to look at is they don't get target fixated on something. So don't just go, I want to live in this village, I want to live in this part of the town, and that's what I want. Well, that's lovely, and we'll probably be successful, but could you just widen your gaze to actually help with that? Because you may find that other areas are probably more appealing. The housing market does change. The market moves so quickly at the moment. The estate agency market, there's a whole other conversation you can talk about, because you don't have estate agents quite to the same degree as we do. So we're working with the agents, and the agents are independent. They work for the landlord. They don't work for you. You don't have that central listing aspect. So you're working with the agents all the time to try and get those properties on and work with them in advance. So we're doing something more proactive work with the agents, trying to make sure that when something comes on, we get the property first. So that's a whole factor. And that's probably a sort of a born out of the whole COVID experience. So prices have calmed down. The demand is still there, but you're still living with that. And that's still a trend that we just have to be alive to.
I think that when you use the word trendy, there's probably not a lot of people that would attribute that adjective to Germany. I think that in general, a lot of the trends, I would say, are a little less only Germany than European in general. Of course, it can't all be blueprinted one to the other, but I think that in general, we share a lot of the same pressure points. Housing is definitely one. There's just not enough of it. That's certainly a problem that both our countries share, yep. And also a problem that we know has been around for a while and also won't, be gone short term. So that's definitely something that's happening. One thing we're seeing is that whereas a lot of large headquartered companies used to be centralized in our bigger cities, they're also very happy now to move towards just slightly different geographic regions than they used to, which of course also means that we have larger populations moving to regions where they haven't traditionally been moving to, which of course comes along with a new set of criteria for, what housing is available there, how does, is there international schooling, isn't there, how is it set up, etc. So I think that in general, there's a lot happening everywhere.
So, so you have housing, school, very big, things to deal with. Are there any other areas that you find that you're constantly, that are of high importance to the people that you're dealing with that, you think is important to bring up alongside housing and school?
I think in general, something that's, I would say I don't really like the word hard, but let's say challenging in Germany, is that we do have a language barrier. It's something that definitely, of course, the English-speaking population that moves into Germany, but also non-native English-speaking transferees struggle with. In Germany, everything that you need to get done is in German. There's, of course, some things, child benefit applications, for example, that are multilingual, but you've got to speak German to find the website where you can then download your multilingual documents. So it doesn't necessarily make it very easy. So I definitely think the language barrier is one of the things where we add the most value in terms of what we do for our transferees. I really wish to say it was completely different, but of course, we're getting there. I think most people are surprised by the quality of English that Germans actually speak, but that doesn't mean that the resources we have for them are English. So that's definitely something that we feel is continues to be quite a pressure point for transferees.
It's interesting. If you
How's
think
your German, Simon?
well, I had a friend who moved to Germany, and there's a whole concise story. Nobody wants to hear this story, and it shows how old it was. Cassettes, remember those?
No, I don't.
No, thank you. So
Sorry,
I learned.
it's too easy.
Yes, I walked into that one. So I learned my German. I was really proud of it. I went into somewhere, and I said my German phrase, which I'm not going to do on this. It's just too embarrassing. I sort of remember it. And I remember almost everybody around me just came to a grinding halt and just stared at me. I'm trying. And apparently what I was saying was nowhere near what I should have been saying. So it's not great. So, but then the thing about the Brits, there's an old joke about this, is that we sold the world our language, so we don't have to learn theirs. And it's a little unfair, and it is done with a humorous intent, but there is a truth to it. So we're not probably the best linguists in the world from that point of view. But so counterbalancing it, you said earlier that Germany's behind on digital aspects, for example. I would actually say one of the quiet things that people don't realise is just how advanced the UK is on this. So when you come to the UK, there is almost no requirement to things like town hall registration, which you have to do. It doesn't exist. You don't have to register with the police. It's all done. Because as soon as you got your visa, everything is actually in play. So there's almost no issues. You got your driving licence, you want that converted to a UK one. It's all online. It's no problem at all. So these sort of things that people perceive to be a pain point, they're just not. It's really quite straightforward, which is quite a surprise. The thing that takes people by surprise, if I'm going to take on the humorous side, because it's always good fun having a laugh at the Brits, is things like people really struggle with is the Brits and small talk. Why do you do this? Why are you talking about the weather for at least 5 minutes? By the way, there is a reason for this, if anybody's interested in knowing why it is the core reason why the Brits do small talk is to actually try and evaluate somebody. Is to try and work out what mood you're in, what you like, what's interesting you, how am I going to raise this topic with you. So the whole small talk thing is to try and actually sort of get a conversation warmed up so you can then go into the key issue. So for a lot of Europeans, I know, especially things like the Dutch, they just look and go, just get to the point. Of course we don't. But there's a reason for that. So that's always a bit of a shock for people. Queuing is an issue, by the way, if you want to stay lighthearted. If you break a queue, good luck to you. That's going to be a major problem.
It's a sport in the UK, isn't it?
Oh, it's unbelievable. We just form queues just out of the blue for almost no reason. And it is kind of amusing. It is fun to do it, but there is a value to this. And if somebody's coming to the UK, they really do have to understand it. And it's these sort of characteristics. Also accents. And we talk about the fact that we did sell the world our language. Great job us. But then we have more accents than you could possibly believe. So, I mean, this is kind of the old joke. You go to the pub and you have somebody from Scotland, Wales and Cornwall in the room, and they're all speaking the same language and nobody has a clue what's going on. And there is a sort of element of truth to this. I've had many a great conversation in Glasgow, and I don't know what they were saying at all. So you have the whole accent thing, which is, again, I think very difficult to understand. And the accent also tells you where you come from, to incredible levels of accuracy, by the way. So anybody listening to this, my accent, that you know where I come from. Which part of South London I come from. It's that focused. So there's a whole bunch of interesting things around this. It's very light-hearted, but at the same time, it's quite serious. So I think somebody relocating in the UK is understanding this. It's funny. British humour is another one. Famous in British humour. I think most people don't get it because it's self-deprecating
I think a lot
humour.
of people don't call it humour, Simon.
Very German. So it's
Apparently, we don't have any. So.
No, this is. I think if you don't know, this is the whole joke. We have humour and you don't.
Yeah.
But it is very different. And again, I think people get surprised by it because it's self-deprecating. So we sort of laugh at ourselves, and then people then go, "Well, one second, you're not taking yourself seriously." No, we're taking ourselves very seriously. But it's quite an unusual one to recognise because then you think, "Well, you're not taking this seriously." We really, really are. So it's understanding those. I think. Coming back to your question ages ago, as what those sort of differences are, I think those are difficult ones for people to understand because you think you know the Brits, but actually there's more going on there.
How do you break somebody into that, though?
Oh, it's great fun. Again, what you just lead into the humour bit is you sort of have a chat with them and say, right, almost like this conversation, let's laugh at us. I'm very happy about that. It's not a problem at all. If you look at all British comedy shows, it tends to be that sort of humour, laughing at ourselves. So let's make ourselves the joke here and really explore that. In fact, one of the fun things is a side issue, which I really quite enjoyed. I know it sounds a strange side issue, but we collected all the frequently asked questions we've ever been asked, and we put it into a chatbot, and we've now made it available. And you can ask it almost any question you want, and all the questions we've been asked is in there with our answers. And it is fascinating what you can explore. And so they say, well, let's walk you through it. Let's explain why this is why we like this. And when you're having a chat with the letting agent, for example, when they say X, they don't mean X, they mean Y. But let me explain why that. Whereas I suggest in Germany, probably most people are saying exactly that's what they say and that's what they mean. In the UK, it's probably a little bit more veiled.
It's interesting. I think we share this. It's funny you say it. We've had a vast number of transferees that have sort of, turned to someone from the team and be like, did he just insult me? And the answer to that is always no. We're a little bit on sort of the Dutch side of our abruptness, and I think a lot of the perception is that, Germans are quite rigid and not very personable, but we're an incredibly kind-hearted country. We just don't like to show that to everybody, but you can always trust, and I actually think this is, to me, when somebody in England invites you to dinner, you never know whether they've actually invited you to dinner or whether they just said it to be polite.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas in Germany, nobody would ever ask you to come for dinner if they didn't mean it. So it's actually a very reliable type of communication to have.
Yes, it's a really good point, actually, because it's in Germany, it says you must come for dinner. You aren't coming for dinner.
Yeah.
That is the conversation. And the UK says you must come for dinner. It doesn't actually mean that.
It's very ambiguous.
But it's how it's said. So you must come for dinner, saying, I'd love to see you again soon. It doesn't mean I will have dinner with you. It means I would love to have your company again. So if you then turn up at the house with a bottle of wine, it's kind of come as a bit of a shock. So, but the same thing could be said in a different way. And actually, it does mean that I'd love to see you come over for dinner. So it's trying to understand those sort of characteristics. I think it's fantastic fun because it's so much able to explore.
So how would the English say thank you for watching the podcast. We'd love to have you again. Does that mean not?
Oh no, but it means it's saying probably again if we do a podcast as well, and I find it really good fun. And usually there's a bit of a joke at the end, and I've realised that actually it translates really well for the British. But I've then spoken to some Americans going, what exactly did you mean by that? So you think, oh yeah, okay, sorry, that was a little bit, yes, okay, fine. Be more straight talking about that. So that's probably, I find it, I can understand why people relocating to the UK struggle with that initially. But once you get it, it is such good fun.
Yeah, I think, I can be really sarcastic sometimes and hold a straight face. And I've really tripped my mother-in-law quite a bit sometimes with that. But it's...
Oh, you do great in the UK then.
Yeah. So as long as we're all on the same page, we'll be all sarcastic together.
Absolutely.
All right. So if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody traveling or, relocating to Germany, UK, last question, what piece of advice would you give them?
I'll let you go first.
Oh, I would say embrace it. The UK, whether you're going to UK or Germany, just lean into that for a second. It doesn't matter where you are in the UK, you're only 75 miles away from the sea. So you're talking about the fact you could be in the mountains, you could be in the beach. Wherever you are in the UK, you could be close to a beach somewhere. It's fantastic. Not only that, you could actually wake up in the morning and go, what, I really fancy having dinner in Paris. And you can have dinner in Paris. What's stopping you doing that? You can actually go, I think it'd be amazing to explore the Highlands of Scotland. Well, then just drive up there. Nothing's very far. It's only about 870 miles from the furthest points in the United Kingdom. It's tiny from that perspective. So you've got more history than you can possibly imagine everywhere. I mean, there's just, you live and breathe it and touch it and feel it. And you almost can't see it from a British point of view, but it's just all there. So the UK is just the most amazing. I mean, Europe is actually, and let's just fly the flag for Europe a second. But the UK, there is so much there. So when you come to the UK, lean into it, embrace it, recognise all the foibles that we have, enjoy it, laugh at it, be part of it. Don't fight it, is what I would say, because it is a fantastic experience. So my view is make the most of it. It's an amazing place to come and stay.
Yeah, I think that applies to most of Europe, actually.
Totally.
You know, if you've got somebody that lives in London and somebody lives in Frankfurt, you can meet for dinner in Amsterdam and Paris, and it's very accessible. In terms of what advice would we give, two things really. The first thing would be to not try and replicate what you have at home in the country you're moving to, and I'd say that this applies to anywhere you're going, not only Germany. And the second one would be to allow yourself to learn, to sort of don't assume that you know everything because maybe you've traveled or you've been anywhere, but living somewhere is quite different than visiting somewhere. And to allow yourself the grace that you're learning while you're in this process, and that it's going to be harder sometimes and easier in others. And I think that's a really important part of making such a journey and such a move a success.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you so much, Simon, for coming on Relocation Leader. I really enjoyed the conversation. You guys made it interesting for sure, and would love to have you on again sometime.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you guys again for watching another episode of Relocation Leader, and we'll see you next time.